Okay, Taz, I have to ask you a question because I've been thinking about this today, which is when you eat your dinner, do you eat your dinner like strategically? Like, for example, all right, my best example is a roast dinner. When you eat a roast dinner, do you eat it strategically, like vegetables first and then you save the Yorkshire till last? Or is that just me?
No, I 100% do that.
I'm glad it's not
Shall I
just
tell
me.
you my order? Shall I tell you my order?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so if there's peas on the plate, either they're being left or they're being eaten first, because I just don't know, like peas are just annoying to eat. I don't love them that much.
I'm with you on that.
And then, then veg next, then meat, then roast potatoes, and then Yorkshire pudding.
Okay, question. When you say your peas are being left, the biggest question in my mind is like, are you eating a few peas and then leaving the rest of them, or like, are you just not touching them at all?
Yeah, I'll eat them, but like there might be a few like dotted around left.
No, this stresses me out.
Why?
So like ever since I was a kid, I have this thing about like if you eat some, for example, we talk about peas, if you eat some of the peas, you have to finish all of the peas, because when I was a kid, I convinced myself that peas like had feelings and that if you ate half of them, you were like leaving some of the family behind. And like, I'm just wondering if anyone else like did this when they were a kid, and then you'd be sat there like crying. I'd literally be crying into my cabbage, like forcing myself to eat the rest of it. So I'd be like, oh my God, like the peas have feelings, the cabbage has feelings, and like I can't leave its family behind. I've got to reunite the family and eat the rest of it.
This is so funny that you say this, because my mum still brings it up to this day. Like I was a very fussy eater when I was like really, really young. Eat anything now, I don't have any issues now, but it's probably down to the fact that my mum was just like, come on, eat your vegetables. But even to this day, she's like, God, like if I clear my plate like so fast, she's like, God, I remember the times I used to sit with you and like on my spoon would be like Daddy, Mummy, and Daniela, and then I'd have to get another scoop and be like, oh, but you can't leave Nana and Granddad behind, and then get another scoop like,
oh my
what
God,
about
I'm so glad it's not just
Uncle
me.
Peter? Like literally, yeah. So I completely get what you're saying with regards to that, and I think mine's more like a strategic eating in the sense that like I will save the best mouthful to last, and usually I'm going to use the example of a roast again. That best mouthful will be a big bit of Yorkshire pudding, maybe a bit of roast potato on there, and like a bit of meat, like the best bit of meat that's been left, all on one forkful with loads of gravy, and then I'll eat that and I'll
Lush.
and I'll actually be upset if I like have something left over on my plate.
Yeah.
That like I don't want to eat and is going to ruin the last mouthful.
Mate, I am so with you. Like, I'm so with you. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you just got to get in all the cabbage. Like, no man left behind. Do you know what I mean? Like, you convince yourself that like the cabbage has feelings, and like, do you know what I'm saying? So I'm so with you.
Okay, well, this actually leads quite nicely on to today's topic, because we're talking as if these food have feelings, but do they really have feelings? Do they have a consciousness? And that is all the topic today is all about, the origins of consciousness. So I don't know why you're laughing. Let's just get into it.
Let's get into it. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast, hosted by Liv and Taz, exploring the world of science and tech, unfiltered.
This season, we're diving into the origins and taking you on a thrilling journey through the breakthroughs and untold stories that shape today's biggest scientific fields.
And of course, every episode brings the same mix of fun, fresh perspectives, and gossip, aka laboratory. From lab scandals to workplace drama, nothing is off limits.
This is So Cultured Season 4, The Origins.
Not us actually reaching just to try and link our introductions to our episodes.
I know, that was such a reach. Like, cabbage has feelings. Let's move on to consciousness.
Oh, that's funny. No, seriously, let's actually get into the episode now. Come on.
Okay. So Consciousness. It is that mysterious, ever elusive experience that defines our lives, yet seems impossible to define. Philosophers, neuroscientists, and thinkers throughout history have grappled with this question, but we still don't have all the answers. In fact, the more we learn, the more complicated the mystery seems to become. But it's what allows us to marvel at a sunset, reflect on the past, and wonder about our future. But what exactly is it? Where does it come from? And why do we have consciousness in the first place? So, what is consciousness? Let's start there. Simply, it is subjective experience. So, consciousness is anything you directly experience from the first person point of view. But the scientific study of consciousness is unique as it has no real defined measurement, rendering it a more kind of immature scientific field than other scientific fields.
That's so interesting to think about it from like that perspective. I've never really thought about it, like how unique consciousness is to every single person, like individually. That's really interesting. So like obviously we spoke a lot about like early humans in this series. Did early humans ever think about consciousness in history? It's one of them things, again, that you just like take for granted. Like sleep, we said this in the sleep episode, like you just take it for granted. So I don't know, did they think about it?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a controversial topic of whether they actually did think about being conscious in like early humans. But to give some context, references to what we deem consciousness were not found in historic texts until the 17th century, so very recently in terms of like the scope of human history. And any other depictions of consciousness were tied more so with beliefs about the human soul, which is argued as kind of like a separate thing altogether, because consciousness is more about self-awareness and experience of our environment, whilst the human soul is more of like a spiritual belief that makes us human, our personalities, and who we are. And it's kind of like a separate entity to our physical body. So if you believed in both concepts, you could technically be physically unconscious, or in other words, dead, but still have a human soul that transcends a physical state in life and a non-physical state in death. And the idea of a human soul has been depicted in ancient Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Greek mythology, as well as various religions such as Hinduism.
That's so interesting. So like why, I guess, did the word consciousness start to like appear in these kind of texts?
Yeah, so the word actually comes from Latin conscius, meaning knowing with or shared knowledge, are often implying kind of a secrecy. But a man called Thomas Hobbes first used it in his book Leviathan in 1651, describing a shared awareness where he stated, where two or more men know of one and the same fact, they are said to be conscious of it one to another. And then later in Latin, conscius cibi was defined, which means knowing with oneself. And this reflected kind of self-awareness, and that's more close to what we now mean by conscious today. Then John Locke, an Enlightenment philosopher, is often credited with shaping the modern idea of consciousness. And in his essay concerning human understanding in 1690, he defined it as the perception of what passes in man's own mind. And around the same time, the French word conscience developed similarly, defined as our inner sense of what we do. And it wasn't really until the 19th century that consciousness began to be studied scientifically. And in this century, a psychologist and philosopher named William James believed that consciousness is a more complex process that allows us to make sense of the world, adapt to environment, and survive. And he described consciousness as a number of things. So the first thing he described it as was continuous flowing, and it was like never stopping but always changing. The next thing he described it as was personal and unique to the individual, and another thing he described it as was an evolutionary tool for survival by being able to plan and also reflect on situations. And then in the 20th century, neuroscience began identifying brain structures and processes involved in consciousness, such as the role of the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus. And philosophers like Thomas Nagel questioned whether subjective experience could ever be fully understood, famously asking, "What is it like to be a bat?" Which I thought was quite interesting. Like, how are we only just having those thoughts in science? Like, the amount of times I've had my like pet dog and I'll be like, what would it be like to be you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, literally. I think that all the time with my cats. I literally look at them and I'm like, you literally never have to write a line of code. You just sleep. You know what I mean? Like, you never have to run a Western blot.
It's always when you're going through something stressful. I remember when I was in the height of my PhD thesis writing and I was just staring at my dog on my bed, just like, you don't have to do any of this and you're just chilling. So annoying.
So true. So true.
But that basically then brings us on to the 21st century, where we start to see technologies like fMRI and the EEG, and that's allowed researchers to actually study consciousness in real time. So revealing insights about brain activity during like different states of awareness. So like wakefulness, sleep, and altered states as well.
So I feel like I'm always that person who's like back referencing other episodes, and I don't know if it's really annoying or not. I mean, if you're someone who listens every week, then you probably just like, you're maybe thinking the same thing. But immediately I go back to the dreams episode where we were talking about all the different brain regions that have been identified to be involved in memory consolidation, sleep, dreams, all of that kind of stuff. So what do we actually know about where, I'm saying this with like quotes for anyone who can't see me, consciousness is found in the brain?
Yeah, so there seems to be a bit of a dispute among neuroscientists. So some neuroscientists believe it to be towards the back of the brain by the visual cortex, as this deals with the sort of sensory areas of the brain, whereas some neuroscientists believe it to be around the prefrontal cortex, which deals with thinking and judgment. And this then relates back to the rest of the animal kingdom, because those scientists that believe consciousness is related more with the sensory areas of the brain would also believe that consciousness is more widespread across the animal kingdom, whereas the scientists who relate it to the prefrontal cortex would believe that consciousness is more associated with humans, as some animal species have like little to no prefrontal cortexes at all. So
I'm kind of just like agreeing with the first one then, because like, is a cat conscious? I don't know. These are good questions, because like now I'm thinking like, I actually don't know. But since we're on the subject of like the animal kingdom, can we talk about how consciousness has evolved? Because I guess that will kind of like help answer that question anyway, right?
So what we do know about consciousness is it probably evolved as a survival mechanism, helping organisms respond to the environment in a way that increases our chance of survival. And the story of its origin traces back to some of the earliest life forms. For example, the simplest animals like the 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗯 adherens, which move in response to stimuli such as the presence or absence of food without necessarily being aware of their environment in the same way that humans are. And this kind of behavior was driven by sensory input and is effective for basic survival. But there are some organisms that don't really need to have like a sophisticated understanding of their surroundings, and they just simply respond to immediate stimuli. So whether that could be considered conscious is probably highly disputed. But the first significant step in the evolution of consciousness likely occurred when organisms began moving directionally towards what benefited them, such as food, rather than just responding to random stimuli. And a great example of this is the 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗯𝗯, which is a flatworm that exhibits a rudimentary form of decision making. So when it's hungry, the worm moves towards food, but when it's well fed, it becomes less active and kind of moves towards hiding places from predators. Yeah, same. Food coma is giving food coma. But this shift from like a simple reflex to a more deliberate movement marks the beginning of a more advanced form of awareness, and awareness of the body's inner state like hunger or satisfaction. And then as evolution continued, organisms developed additional sensory tools like vision, which allowed them to not only react to immediate surroundings but also to perceive depth and space. And vision actually added a whole new dimension to awareness, enabling organisms to like visualize and lock on to a specific target, whether that was food or safety. But with these abilities, a basic form of consciousness was still limited to perceiving what was immediately present. So organisms that relied solely on their senses couldn't anticipate what's coming next. They could only react to what was currently in their field of view. So almost like, I guess, what you would kind of think of a goldfish, where like the wives tell like goldfish has like a 5-second memory kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so you see animations of like goldfish like eat food and then be like, did I eat food? Because like they have no concept of like memory, and
Yeah.
they can just sort of react to like what is directly in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
But then to kind of solve this issue, memory emerged, and it allowed organisms to recall useful information and act with more intention. So even when food was out of sight, they would remember maybe where it is or where they found it, or if they were distracted by something, they would have the ability to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a cognitive milestone known as object permanence. And then as consciousness advanced, organisms then developed a sense of time. So that enabled them to then anticipate possible future events. So a good example of this is a scrub jay, which is a type of bird. And this jay would hide food for later use, showing that it's not only planning to eat it for the future, but it also has like awareness that other creatures might try and take that food as it's hiding it. And that kind of social awareness like is another step up to consciousness, and is often described as like mind reading. This is the sort of consciousness that enables like strategic thinking and understanding that other people or other organisms have their own perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said about like understanding that like other people have their own perspectives, because like as humans, I feel like we get a lot of that from language, right? Or like reading people's emotions, as in like literally like reading people's faces. So I don't know, like what about language, and what about like humans specifically, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. You've kind of hit the nail on the head there. Like language was the next most transformative step in the development of consciousness, specifically for humans, because the ability to kind of communicate ideas and reflect on the past and plan for the future like creates this kind of communicative feel. And also like just to be able to consider our own existence enabled this like elevated level of self-awareness. And obviously language allows us to articulate thoughts, share them with others, and even think about, literally as we are now, consciousness itself. So this leap in cognitive abilities is really what sets humans apart, because it essentially gives us the ability to build societies, develop technologies, and like literally explore the universe, both physically and through like development of technology and science, but also through our own imagination, which is another thing that sets humans apart as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting, like talking about imagination as well, because I always think when cats imagine things, they imagine me coming home with like extra packs of �ㄍ𝘂𝗎𝗓𝗏𝑠. I always think about this.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in like specifically cats, just because I've always had cats and I just love them. I'm such a cat girl. But so you spoke about how humans have almost like this elevated consciousness compared to these other animals, and that's due to language. Does this mean that there are different levels of consciousness then? For example, there are maybe like cats are conscious, but they're conscious at a lower level than us as humans.
Yeah, you could say essentially that as the brain develops, you get an increased complexity level of consciousness that comes with it. So we can look at a certain animal species, say dog or a cat, and like as a pet owner, you will be able to see that your pet portrays, like, I think depending on what animal it is, but I'm speaking from like the perspective of being a dog owner and you a cat owner. But dogs and cats, like they portray emotion, they respond to pain, and they like make decisions. And so that could be consciousness, but like at a lower level to humans. And literally talking about humans specifically, even babies, when they're still developing, they seem to have a lower level of consciousness compared to a full-grown adult, which is like very obvious when you think about it in plain terms. But also on the back of this, the more we seem to research this, the more conscious we find babies to be, and other animals, in their own different way. For example, we actually didn't used to anesthetize babies for certain procedures. Like one of the most famous ones was circumcision, like,
oh my God,
pretty much straight away. Like when you're a baby, they didn't used to anesthetize babies for circumcision, as they kind of thought that babies didn't have a level of consciousness to emotionally respond and process pain in the same way that children or adults do. But due to research, we now believe that they are, quote unquote, aware of this, or visually or emotionally experience this situation.
Do they not cry though? Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's literally crying its heart out and they're just like, nah, can't feel it.
I don't think it's that they don't have pain receptors, because they definitely experience the pain, but it's more how that links to your consciousness.
Okay. I didn't even know that they used to like not, like, no, that's crazy. They didn't even like numb them. Poor little babies.
The main basis for this, right, is that we don't remember being a baby. We don't have a memory of like coming out of the womb.
I guess that makes sense, yeah.
So that's the basis for like not thinking that they have this level of consciousness that adults do.
That's so interesting. Okay, but then off the back of that, like, what about people who are in a coma, or like, you know, when you're under general anesthetic to like be put to sleep for like an operation or whatever? What about them then? Is that also considered a lower level of consciousness?
Yeah, it is absolutely a lower level of consciousness. So general anesthesia has a different effect on everyone, but the aim of it is to essentially wipe out consciousness, like a dreamless, non-REM sleep. But this doesn't actually happen in everyone. And there are new reports that 1 in 10 people who undergo general anesthesia actually experience some retained or connected consciousness, where they're able to respond to questions or communicate by squeezing a researcher's hand to say that they were experiencing pain, which is crazy to me. And off of the back of this research, it was also found that females were 3 times more likely to experience this than men. But the key part though was that apart from 0.29%, which was 1 person in the study of 338 people, everyone who showed they had a retained level of consciousness in surgery then had no recollection of it afterwards.
I think it's really interesting that they don't have any recollection of it afterwards. Like, even though they're responding in some way, suggesting that they're conscious in some way, I wonder if it's just like a different state of sleep that they're in. The general anesthetic has just sent them into a different state of sleep, and it makes it seem like they're conscious, but they're not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely research on it, and I was reading a paper and it defines several things as what would be considered conscious. So like having visual images in your brain, obviously like in REM sleep, that is a level of consciousness, because your brain is creating scenarios that you're experiencing in your head essentially. So that's a level of consciousness, whereas like non-REM sleep, you don't have that. So that is an even lower level of consciousness, if that makes sense. And this paper was kind of like summing up different scenarios. So like deep general anesthetic, you're meant to experience 0 consciousness, and all the factors that contributed to consciousness were at 0. But then you had other things like brain injuries, what level of brain injury and how conscious you are. And yeah, it was just so interesting. Even like they included REM and non-REM sleep, and whether you had dreams in both those scenarios and what level of consciousness that was. I think the common theme throughout is that there's no absolute defined answer on what consciousness is and what level of consciousness is conscious. Do you know what I mean? And also another question that people have kind of failed to be able to answer is why consciousness has evolved over a sort of computer-based logic that we see in like computers today in our day-to-day lives, that can still seem to make decisions and reflect and facilitate motility, because that is essentially how consciousness evolved, and how what they believe the reason behind consciousness to be. So from that
that's
respect,
really interesting.
why don't we just work like computers in that respect?
That is really, really interesting, because I guess that like brings in the topic of AI, right? Because AI can do all of these things, like it can memorize things, it can strategically plan, it can forward think, it can do all of these things, and you can even program it to like take in visual cues, like all of these different things. That's actually a really, I've never thought about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it really does feel like we're getting kind of closer and closer to that point with regards to computers or AI being conscious. And we spoke about the Turing test in the AI episode of this season, which, to recap, was basically if a human interrogator asked a machine and a human questions and couldn't distinguish the machine from the human, then it would have achieved human level artificial intelligence. And actually, the goalpost of the requirements for the Turing test has moved significantly over the past 10 and 20 years, to the point now that for a machine to pass the Turing test, it would probably have to exhibit a level of consciousness similar to humans, because it's definitely intelligent enough already.
And even when we spoke about the Turing test, I didn't think about the fact that the Turing test now would be so different to what it was back then. I didn't even think about that. Okay, so question. Do you think we can really define something as having a consciousness if we don't even really have a set criteria for like what consciousness is? Because if you think about it, like in humans, one of the main ways we test if someone is conscious is through like a verbal report. So, you know, when like doctors or paramedics will ask, oh, what year are we in? Or what day is it? Like if we were to ask AI like those questions, it would literally pass with like flying colours. So,
well, yeah, exactly. AI has access to all types of information, right? So it can just pull that as a resource at any time. It doesn't need to recall things from memory or like personal experience. So from that very fact alone, it will probably never be similar to a human type of consciousness or like the criterion for that. And until we've truly defined some mathematical equation for human consciousness, I don't think we'll know what constitutes as being conscious with regards to a human. And that's because human perception and experience is one of the highest criterions for consciousness. So if I were to ask you about something you've seen that has evoked an emotional or like an internal reaction within yourself, could you tell me about something?
what, like from today?
No, just like your whole life. Like, have you ever seen something and been like, oh my God, that's just insane?
Yeah, actually, do you know what? Like one thing that traumatized me in my life is that one time when I was younger, one of my cats got run over, and my mum literally like showed me the run over cat. And like, I don't really know why she did this, but like that has stuck with me forever. Like that has stuck with me.
Well, that's quite morbid. I was really hoping you'd be like, oh, this one time I saw this, it was amazing, and it made me feel these certain ways. But like,
if we go from, I'll go from like today, for example, I was at like a pole dance workshop and I was watching all of my like pole besties like dance, and like they all look so happy. Like that made me happy. There you go. That's something that's like from today.
I mean, those are both very good examples, and it's quite nice that you gave like two ends of the spectrum, like kind of like a traumatic experience, which is like, yeah, that is human consciousness, but also like your friends doing well, that is human experience, that's human consciousness, and your consciousness specifically. Like for me, like when I went traveling, like I saw so many things that evoked like an emotional reaction. Like one example was when I was scuba diving in Koh Tao in Thailand. Literally just like some of the things that I saw made me feel like I was just blown away. Do you know what I mean? And I remember one time I did a night dive and all we had was like a torch and we were swimming around in a cove and like literally it's pitch black. So like not only was that situation kind of scary because you literally just have this spotlight vision from your torch, but all of a sudden this turtle came flying over the top of me and I was like shining this torch at it and it was just insane. And I was like, this is something that I'll probably remember for a long time. But it's like these kind of experiences and the related emotions that we associate with consciousness, and it's this level of consciousness that we don't see in AI, you know, or we don't see in AI yet. So
I think that raises a really good point, which is AI, like you said earlier, has access to any information that it wants. Like actually, when you think about it, like AI could quote unquote experience anything And I think that's what makes like human consciousness special, is that we don't have the ability to do that. Like we can't just access any information at any point without using like AI. Do you know what I mean? So like these little experiences that we have, like physical experiences, are probably, yeah, like you said, like they evoke all these emotions, and that's what contributes to consciousness. This is really interesting. Never really thought about all of this. Maybe this is like going on a bit of a tangent, or like me just being a bit like dystopian, and I always like these kind of questions. But what do you think about the theory that we're all living in a simulation, and like how that relates to like consciousness?
The simulation theory is just a theory right now, okay? But it is based on the fact that if you have a mathematical equation for literally the way everything works in the universe, then yeah, you could create an exact simulation of the reality that we are experiencing by utilizing those mathematical equations. And certainly, if we aren't currently in a simulation, we could see technology going that way in the future, obviously, where we're going to be creating simulations of worlds like metaverse, for example, and maybe technologies that tap into our conscious mind through mediating your own personal experience and perception. So say, for example, like a brain chip that alters your perception of each of your senses. So audio and visual currently are simulated quite well already, but brain chips could facilitate the imitation of touch, or smell, of taste, and like literally create this like simulated world. And if we wanted to get even more futuristic, if we could model consciousness through a mathematical equation, there's no reason why we couldn't, quote unquote, download our conscious mind to a computer-based system. So yes, given Black Mirror, but it could be possible.
Oh my God, I'm literally going to be laying in my bed like thinking about this. That's scary, but that's true though. Like literally maths, yeah, that is so true.
You know what, I actually think consciousness is one of the things that is probably the scariest kind of thing to think about. If we advance in technology and we understand more about it, then there's no reason why we couldn't like immortalize ourselves and like our conscious mind. So I think that's,
I'm sure there's
scary.
probably a Black Mirror episode on this. Like I'm sure there is. There is, isn't there?
Yeah,
about
there is.
Can I just say that this podcast has taught me, I swear to God, more than my degrees have? Because throughout this whole episode, I feel like we have actually picked up so many little nuggets in this episode from other episodes. And again, I'm doing my back referencing, but we've spoken about dreams, and you just mentioned about neural chips. We did the Neuralink episode. And I think had we not done this podcast, when you had just said that last paragraph, I would have been like, what the hell is this girl talking about? Like literally, I don't understand what she's talking about. What do you mean a neural chip can stimulate touch? But from all of my knowledge from previous episodes, I'm literally like, yeah, I can actually fully understand and see how this could be a thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time we're kind of touching on some of like the newest technologies that are coming out, and that is kind of a common theme throughout our podcast. So we are technically constantly learning about these new things, but it is crazy to think what is being done in science and technology these days. We are really seriously in a phase where we are advancing at such a rapid rate that like God knows what the world is going to look like in 10 years. Like, just the idea that we could have brain chips that are simulating all of our senses to change our very perception of everything is just mad.
Yeah, I feel like my brain's just going a million miles an hour after that last paragraph's blown my mind. Anyway, this was such an interesting and thought-provoking episode. I'm definitely going to be laying in my bed tonight, just thinking of all of these things. If you guys want to learn more about anything that we spoke about in today's episode, as we always say, some links will be in the episode description. And for now, I think it's about time we get on to the laboratory section for today's episode.
I'll slip into your dreams tonight.
Okay, so before we get into today's laboratory, we just want to give you guys a quick reminder that if you have any laboratory to share with us, please do, because we are now starting to recruit our stories for season 5. So if you have anything that you want to share with us, then please click the link in the episode description or the video description. This is anonymous. We feel like we have to tell you guys every single time because we don't want people to be withholding stories because they think that we're going to figure out who it is. So don't worry, we do not receive any of your information. So don't be scared, submit your story because we need some good stuff for season 5. Okay, with that being said, let's get into today's story. So it starts off by saying, my friend stole my entire third year dissertation idea, but karma came back around. Okay, so rewind. Me and my so-called friend were both doing integrated masters. During our third year, we were discussing what our master's projects were probably going to be, and our uni told us we should use our masters to build on our third year dissertation. That makes sense. I feel like a lot of people do that. I told her how I was going to ask a specific member of staff if I could do a project on the different subspecies of tigers with them. I was excited to do this new project and I told my friend all the details of how I wanted to do this project. Fast forward to project selection time and I found out that, in quotes, my friend had approached the same member of staff and presented my idea as her own. Since I had no proof that she had taken the idea from me, I couldn't report her. What? So instead, I had to scramble for a brand new project. Needless to say, I cut this friend off ASAP. But karma came back around though because I secured my current PhD project and she dropped out of academia. Oh my God, that is savage. Can you imagine? I would be absolutely fuming if someone did that to me because I feel like it's really hard to come up with like a project idea. Like it either just comes to you or you have to sit there for ages trying to come up with it. So I would actually be so angry. Like, what would you even do?
Yeah, I don't even know, but that is so deep. And also, how on earth did the friend who stole the topic think that was going to be fine and they were still going to be friends?
Literally.
I'm so confused. Or maybe she was just like, I don't care about this friendship, I care about my degree more.
Every man for themselves kind of vibe.
Yeah, some people are actually psycho. I don't know what I would do in that scenario. I feel like you'd just have to take it on the chin, wouldn't you? Or would you say something?
Nah, listen, the listener's better than me because I'd be so pissed off. Like, I'd have to say something. First of all, I would go to them and I'd be like, dude, what the hell? Like, I think you just got to confront them about it. Like, the fact that you didn't confront them about it is amazing to me because I would have to go up to them and just be like, what the hell? Why would you do that? And then I would have to go to the PI and I would be like, look, this was my idea and I told them about this idea and now they've approached you with it and we need to figure something out here. Like, we need to get her in this room and have a freeway conversation here because I'd be so angry. There's no way I'm letting her get away with it. No way.
Yeah, because surely you'd be so, she sounded very passionate about the subject if she was telling her friend all about it, all the ins and outs. So you're obviously very excited to do that project. So yeah, maybe I would be confrontational in that respect as well and just be like, why on earth have you done this? Because surely if it's your idea, then you kind of have the thoughts about it to back it up and the kind of proof that it was your project all along compared to this person who's just stolen the idea. Do you know what I mean? So you could probably prove it knowledge-wise.
This is what I'm saying though, maybe this is a bit harsh, but if you have to be stealing someone else's ideas, maybe you're not cut out for this job anyway. Is that a bit harsh? I don't know. That's the whole point of research is to be innovative and come up with these ideas. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yes, you can bounce ideas off of people. That's really important. But if you have to steal someone's whole idea, maybe this isn't for you, babe. Maybe that's why she's left academia.
But I'm also what a waste then. You stole this project, ran with it, and you didn't even see it through to academia to do anything with it. It's just
maybe
waste.
She just wanted her master's though. She just wanted her master's and then she wanted out. So she was doing anything to get her master's. Do you know what I mean? If that means stealing a project and losing a friend, she was willing. Clearly, she was willing.
Some people are actually savage. I would not be able to do that.
I'd be too embarrassed to do that. My pride actually couldn't let me. I'd be way too embarrassed. And I would just say to them, oh, look, do you know what? Can you help me come up with a project idea? Because I can't do it, babe. And I'm going to leave academia after this. So, I'll be open about the fact that I can't do this. So, please help me. Also, in this day and age, I'm sorry, but just ask ChatGPT. I would have just put in ChatGPT, oh, my friend's got this really cool project idea and I want to do something similar. Can you help me come up with an idea? And ChatGPT will literally do it for you. How lazy are we that we're literally just straight up stealing an idea when ChatGPT exists?
You love a ChatGPT, don't you?
Oh, I love me and ChatGPT are actual, yeah. We're going to have a work Christmas party, just us.
Yeah, it's you and ChatGPT that got you through
the team.
Yeah, no, that's so true though. I just think, put in the work, babe. Put in the work. It's not even hard in this day
I wonder
and
what she's
age.
doing now. Like, she's dropped out of academia, but like, what is she doing now? Is she still in the field? Like, what's the stage?
Clearly not in anything that's remotely innovative. Unless she's just stealing people's ideas still.
We
Maybe,
hope
yeah,
not.
that's the thing. She didn't learn from her mistake because our listener didn't call her out on it. So, like, maybe she's still out there doing it. She was like, oh, this is a brilliant idea. I'm just going to continue doing this.
So to our other
Throughout
listeners,
my
if this
career.
ever happens to you, like, just speak up. Like,
Don't take any.
Yeah, sometimes I think that I'm like too vocal and I'm too confrontational and argumentative, and like I wish I wasn't, but then in circumstances like this I'm like, no, do you know what, like I'm actually glad, even if it changed nothing and she was still doing the project and I still had to like come up with something else, like I would still just feel better from the fact that I've just told you that you were out of order. Do you know what I mean? Like, that still made me feel better for me to just tell you that you're a bit, like I'd feel better.
Yeah, I think I'm also a very confrontational person, but I wouldn't create an argument for the sake of it. But if I feel there's like an injustice, then I will speak up about it.
Yeah,
rather
same.
than let someone get away with it, especially if it's like not directly affecting me. If it's like directly affecting like a friend, then I'll be like, nah, this is not happening. I also think it's like such an important skill if you are in science, because science is actually relentless when it comes to stealing ideas, because people are like constantly fighting to be the first person to do something. So if you are finding that you are quite good at coming up with innovative ideas, people will be ready to pounce on that and like claim it as their own. So you really do need to have a backbone in science. So if you're listening and you want to pursue like a career in academia, then a backbone is one of the things that you need to have, not only to like, I guess, claim a project for yourself and be able to kind of stick up for yourself if you've contributed in a way that you feel should be reflected in like published paper, or even just being able to bat off questions, because I do feel that scientists really try and bring other scientists down. Like, not all scientists are like this, but there are some people who are quite high up in the field, maybe quite traditional, and they're fairly happy to just try and tear you apart. And you really do have to just stand your ground and be okay with being like, no, in this scenario you are wrong, and kind of like back yourself up in the sense that you know more about a subject than the person asking questions, which I was one of the things I found quite hard to like come to terms with when I was doing like a presentation or like communicating results. It can be like really savage, and you just have to have the backbone to bat that off, and you do actually have to be quite confrontational and be like, oh, like, and so that kind of goes hand in hand with like creating your own ideas and be able to like claim something that is yours within your area of research or like what you've done in the field.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And also, like, you don't always have to give details, you know what I mean? Like, obviously you have to discuss like what you're doing, or like maybe you want to discuss what you're doing because you're excited about it, but like sometimes let's not give details. Let's just be like, oh, you know what, like I'm working on this is the title, but like we're not going to be divulging details here, because if you're not clever to figure out the details, then tough. That is the moral of the story from today's laboratory.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that wraps up the episode. Next week is actually our last episode of the season, which is crazy to me. But next week, Liv is going to be talking all about the origins of the internet. And also we will have our laboratory as normal as well. But definitely tune in next week for our last episode. And if you have been enjoying this series so far, then be sure to give us a rating on the platform that you listen on, or on YouTube. If you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that helps us as well, or leave a comment. We always love hearing or seeing your guys' feedback, so yeah, please be sure to do that, because it helps us out and it helps us improve for future seasons as well, because we're already planning season 5. So if there's something that you want us to change, let us know.
Yeah, and I just love reading like people's comments when people like message us or they comment like whether it's good, bad. I just love reading them. So yeah, make sure you do that. But with that, we will see you guys in next week's episode where, like Taz said, we're going to be exploring the origins of the internet and talking about how and who the hell started the internet, because how are you even that clever? Anyway, we will see you guys in next week's episode.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.